it is. It's $3,500 chair.
Woo!
All right, so let's share this. Then we can start.
$3,500 for a chair is a little out of control, even for me. What in?
Look at this thing.
Is that like a gaming?
Yeah,
it's like a gaming chair. It's like a gaming massage.
Yeah, like the base moves and everything.
That's a whole wow. Okay.
Like look at that thing, man.
That thing is wild. Most of those that I see like that are kind of like cockpit kind of style. Of course it leans back like that.
Leans back, everything else, yeah.
All right.
I'm like, well, there's a chair.
Okay. I mean, for $3,500, it should be pretty awesome.
Yeah. My thought was I just want one of these, the nice kind of like fabric with a little bit of extra stuff in them, like the mesh, but like a decent, that won't say crap, but like a decent chair, you know?
Yeah.
So I got to find something.
Well, I stand behind the X chair for the most part.
Yeah. But like you said, you did a pretty penny for that chair, huh?
I did pay a pretty penny for this chair.
Heating, cooling, and massaging.
Yeah.
It does look fucking awesome.
It is pretty awesome. I use the heating and the massage basically almost all day.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you got a worse back than I do too, because you had an injury.
I do.
Mine's just I sit like shit.
Yeah. You can tell when my back's really bothering me because I fiddle around like I constantly just cannot sit still.
You can't find a spot.
Oh, there's nowhere to go.
Very cool. So my thought was with the conversation here is, right, we have our normal opening, the conversation like we always do and close it out. So the only differences really are, actually, there's no real difference.
There's no real difference. There's no real difference. We're just going to continue to do the same thing we did before, but we're going to take an hour to talk about it before we do the exact same thing.
We actually do the same thing. We did that the other day. And then I cut most of it out, but yeah, it's funny. I do believe we are in the analysis paralysis phase of this journey.
We are in the depths of analysis paralysis at this point.
Oh yeah.
It is a bit out of control, and it should be a lesson to everybody to be careful how much you just try to dive into a question that's unanswerable and maybe just build some more data points, build a hypothesis, validate or invalidate that hypothesis, and then build another hypothesis. Instead, what we've done is we're going to go into the what if machine, and then we're just going to talk about every possible what if and not have any data, not have anything to back it up. And we're just going to be like, yeah. I mean, but what about this? It's like, well, yeah, but what about that? And it's just all downhill from there.
There is a process this week that I was reading about it, and I thought it was an awesome idea. And instead of post-mortem, it was pre-mortem. And you just made me think of that because it was basically put your team together and talk about all the scenarios that are going to cause problems for the project before they happen instead of after. And then see if you have things in place that probably would assist, whether it's communication problems, business problems, politics, technical problems, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You and I are in a pre-mortem, and we are asking every possible combination of questions we can think of and scenarios for this podcast and video, set up on YouTube. And we've exhausted maybe every possible scenario with the inability to answer any of our possible scenarios. So,
yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating, but it's also been fun.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun.
Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the ride for the folks that have been around since the early days.
Yeah. The part that people who know us don't miss because they're on video with us on and off often. But the part a lot of people miss is you and I doing this when we either have a drink or we're super tired or one of these other crazy scenarios where you're just done. Like we've had enough for the day. We've used up all of our energy. Those are fun. We'll probably never be on, maybe live stream, but they'll never be on the video part. But then they are fun to listen to.
They are. The one we did the other day where luckily my computer decided to update in the middle of it, but it was some of the worst content we've ever created.
Your computer
and I've created some really bad content before.
Yeah. Your computer, or they saved them more than us.
Yeah. Oh man.
It is a fun journey. It's amazing. A lot of respect for people who create documentaries, people who create videos, people who do the technology side of this, of not the tech side like we do, but using it and building and designing all these things, people who write stories and create narratives, and, you know, people who are on YouTube that most people think that their job is easy, though they have teams, as we've talked about. But even that, it's a lot of kudos to everybody there. Like, as you and I keep learning and playing with all this tech, like, there's a lot in here. And then after that, you want to be creative too? Okay. Well,
I mean, it's the crazy part. Not only do you need to be creative, you need to understand all the technology, you need to understand everything that goes along with it. And that's honestly been my struggle over the last couple of weeks. And we talked about before about the video editing problems, but just moving from somebody that's used a Mac for like the last 6 or 7 years to I cannot remember the last time I used a Windows machine. And I have very recently started using a Windows machine again. And it has been quite the journey for me of remembering drivers, you know, like antivirus. Like, I forgot that was a thing.
Right.
And no, it's a thing that you still need, which seems kind of odd to me. And I've also had, you know, everybody, well, you may not, I think you all have heard about my camera experience. I've also had a problem with my mouse. It works great on my Mac. It works just fantastic. But this dang thing will not work on my Windows machine. If I restart it, you got about 10 minutes and it'll work just fine. And then, nope. It'll stop and it'll lag. I mean, so much so where your whole computer becomes completely unusable.
And you want to throw it and you want to break it and get rid of that stupid mouse. And yep. Yeah.
Agonizing. And we're people in the technology world, and I've Googled more dumb things over the last handful of days. That's like, well, yeah, but how do I stop my mouse from being laggy? Yeah. Google's going to give you a really great answer when that's the best question that you can ask. And I've, I had to go to this point where I had to buy a new mouse.
You did buy one?
I did. I bought a new mouse, a Glorious i1, I think is what it was. Okay. Something like that. But
I've gone to wired mice. Like, I just use a wired mouse, plain simple wired mouse, works really well. And latency for playing a game that I play, right? There is no latency really. So
this is wired. It also has like a 2.4 gigahertz dongle, and it does Bluetooth.
Nice.
So if I'm using my Mac, I can just switch it over to Bluetooth. If I'm using my Windows machine, I can just use it wired and hopefully cross my fingers, toes, everything else, like everything that I can do to just pray to God this thing works.
Yeah, it's got one job.
I am done with technology not working.
Well, it's almost like it's, I always say we have to pay the gods. Something has to go wrong for something to go right. So it's almost like you have to deal with all your frustrations at home. So what we do for a living for work works fine.
Yeah. And there's just a level of frustration that continues to grow, and you just hope that it doesn't go too far and push you over the edge, and then you smash your mouse into 100 pieces.
But sometimes that feels good. But yes.
You can't actually make it work anymore. But the other funny thing is, and then we could actually get into the meat of the content that we're actually going to talk about, is with my old mouse. I'm like, oh, well, maybe if I just reconnect it, like I'll just completely, forget this mouse, and then I'll go back in and reconnect it. Well, that's fine when you have a MacBook with a touchpad. I then ended up having no mouse, and I was trying to tab space my way through menus to try to reconnect a mouse again. It was like I had never done this before in my life.
Like you've never worked on a Windows machine ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Should have had a camera around it because it was pretty comical.
Yeah, I had a gentleman on a call today, this week, who was a heavy Linux user, and his comment was, I'm in technology. Of course I know Linux. Who wouldn't know Linux? If you don't know Linux, like, how are you a technologist? And I laughed. I was like, well, okay. That reminded me of this conversation. That reminded me of the Windows conversation, because his second thing he said was, my company only uses Windows. And I had to switch over, and he goes, I have no idea what to do on this thing.
I mean, you feel like an idiot.
Yeah. It took me a while to go to Mac. Now I'm really good on the Mac. And I think if I switched over completely, to your point, it would take a little while. The Windows machine I have now, I mainly use for a couple small things, and I play computer games on it. So I don't have to remember too many of the features and functions, you know.
I just need to learn my shortcut keys and I'll be good. Like I miss Spotlight because I'm just so used to hitting Command Tab or Command Shift. Or no,
I like
Space.
Alfred as a plugin I put on my Mac.
You know, I don't even have to think about it. I don't even know what the buttons are on the Mac. I just know how to hit them.
You just know what you need now. Yeah. Alfred I use. If you've ever played with Alfred, it's another app you can put on top, and it gives you all these like super user functions. And I use all the shortcut keys and all the things I plug into that and built into it. If I go to do that on any other machine, it's not there. So none of it works. So all of a sudden when I'm doing //TS, it's not adding in dynamic text. It's not modifying things, you know? And all of a sudden I'm lost. Now I have to think about what do I want to do? How did I want to build it, format it, something? And you realize how good shortcuts can make or break a day. Like you can get a lot done with shortcuts.
And you're trying to help automate your life and make your life easier for things that you've done a lot. And it's great. Once you can get that set up, it's fantastic. Yeah, and having to start over from scratch again, not so fantastic.
No, not so much. Nope. There is a tool out there, and I don't remember what it is, but there is one that you can mimic some of those automations, but I don't think there's anything that works on both so that you could just seamlessly go back and forth.
I am not aware of anything, but everything that I know is in the Mac ecosystem. And so I'm having to chart new waters for me. And
it's an adventure.
You know, Reddit has been my friend. Lots of other things have been my friend to try to find the right answers. And, you know, just keep moving on.
Yeah.
So what's been going on in your world, man? How's your week been?
Pretty good. I was just going to say there was a comment that came up, or quote that I made during conversation. My conversation lately has been a lot around companies dealing with legacy systems, as we've talked about, and resiliency and things like that. So it's been a pretty cool week with conversations and topic and just our environment in general. Then there's normal team stuff, you know, and developers not understanding how much of a consulting skill set they should have, or social skills or soft skills and those kind of things, which is always fun to deal with. But the one thing that came up I thought was interesting was around resiliency. And I wrote a quote I stuck on a slide and I liked it. And the client's like, I'm going to steal that. I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's perfect. And it was that resiliency is the story of the outage that didn't happen.
That's a great quote.
I was like, I like that. I'm going to keep that on a slide. So, and he's like, I'm stealing it. I'm perfect.
And, you know, it's always hard to track a negative or track a thing that didn't happen. But, you know, I think that's always from whether you're talking about resilience engineering or kind of SRE type work, that's always one of the hardest things is if you're doing your job correctly and you're doing it well, no one's going to know.
Right.
Because things just work. And
right.
How do you track some of that in a way that can validate your existence is always an interesting, interesting problem.
If they let all of you go when everything falls apart, now they're going to realize why, you know, your job was valuable, why you were valuable, but you can't easily show that while you're there. Theoretically.
I know you brought up an interesting stat the other day, and I don't know if you have it handy, but it was something along the lines of the average company loses like millions of dollars a year on kind of resiliency failures, or, you know.
Yeah, it's almost $6,000 a minute on outages. The average company through a year now is estimated to lose $1.2 to $2.5 billion annually on outages and issues with systems.
Well, that would
and
be
other
probably
things.
at the enterprise level then, if it's in the
enterprise
billions,
level
but,
for that one.
Yeah.
But the average that came from Gartner Research, I think, was about 5,600. I think was the exact number, but
Per
between
minute?
5 and 6 per minute.
I mean, that's a hell of an impact.
Yeah.
And, if you're thinking about, kind of one of the, well, there's a lot that goes into resiliency engineering as a whole, but one of the things that you used to hear about all the time, but you don't hear about quite so much anymore, is chaos engineering. And I don't know why not. To me, this is a really key aspect of kind of testing that you should be thinking of when you're building out any of your critical type systems, especially in the distributed world in which we live with microservices and tons of dependencies. What happens if you turn this thing off? What happens if you lose connectivity to your database or to this other set of services or whatever? What actually happens to your application?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that just don't know. And they find out when that thing eventually happens. That's when they find out. And
You find out the hard way. Yeah.
you get the phone call at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. because it never happens at 2 p.m. And then
This
all of a
is true.
sudden you're sitting at your kitchen table in the middle of the night trying to figure out why your service isn't working anymore.
It is appreciative to be a remote worker at this point in time for those types of problems. Now you can get up and just figure it out from your house instead of when we were doing this younger. You'd have to, at least where I was, I'd have to drive to a train, get on a train, take the train down into the city to go work on a system in a secured location or something else possibly, right? Or everything was always an hour to an hour and a half away. There was no quick, just get up and get it done. It was get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, put your pants on and go drive to the office early because something's not working.
Yeah. And for anybody that's not super familiar with chaos engineering, it's really it's an exercise in randomly doing events across your ecosystem and testing to see what happens. How well can your service or set of services respond to these individual outages and repair themselves whenever they're back? And, there's definitely, there's a bunch of tools out there that can do this now, that can help facilitate this now, but it's definitely something that if you're not doing, you should absolutely be thinking about it because you don't know.
Yeah, the way that I was explaining it, or I explained it, was resilience engineering was implementing the tools and practices that the chaos engineers were developing to promote the design of software that's able to proactively adjust to the experiments and the deviations that we see from, the issues that we're trying to create in those systems, right? One is to find vulnerabilities and test the systems in a way that if an anomaly happens, right, we can recover as quick as possible. And then the other one is helping to teach and educate people on these types of issues and how to design for them or design around them, right?
Yeah. A really great exercise that I've done a handful of times is around this space, and I absolutely love it. If you're thinking about a team building event, nobody wants to go bowling or do some dumb crap like that to go build teams, but everybody loves playing a fun game, and you can do some really cool stuff. You talked about kind of chaos engineering experiments. Well, what should those experiments be? Well, this exercise, you take, half a team or a couple of people, and then the other people are on the other team, and one team, their goal is to break it. And the other team's goal is to either, you didn't break it, or to figure out what went wrong and then make it where that doesn't happen again. And so you're using creativity and a scoring and gamification of things to help identify interesting and novel ways for your thing to break. Because it never breaks the way you think it's going to break. It's always some weird thing. Well, not always, but it's usually some weird thing that's going to come and throw your whole system into complete disarray. That's when you start getting phone calls.
Yeah. Because it's the interconnectivity between multiple services and systems and everything else that you don't take into account, right? That's usually where it's going to break. If the connectivity point's not always in the system itself. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting that doesn't get taken into account is beyond the tech, right? The culture and how it handles issues, how we deal with problems, the business side of it overall, the applications themselves. Then you have the cloud. I was in a conversation the other day and I kept saying chaos engineering and what we were looking at. And they kept going, oh, yeah, the cloud. Okay, we're going to look at the cloud. We're going to assess the cloud. We're just going to look at the cloud. And I said, no, it's more than the cloud. Like the ask is the organization, like everything. Like let's understand, because the ability to be a resilient organization as a whole requires more than just how you're leveraging the cloud, right? That 10 years ago when it came out, it was because the way we were doing, trying to build resilient systems then, right, was different technology 10 years ago than it is today. So to your question earlier, a lot of these thoughts and practices are built into some of the things we do, or at least some people say they're built in. I'm still not sure I agree with that, but the concept is there. But I think it is a good question. I think it's a question to say, do we still think about chaos in the same way, or is it we're just still trying to create, resilient systems and scalable systems?
Well, I think it's all morphed a little bit over the years. I look at this, whether you call it resiliency engineering, call it SRE, call it whatever words you want, but it all comes down to how do we make sure things don't fall on their face? And there's the concept of like test driven development when it comes to, writing of code. We can argue about that, but thinking about resiliency and, whether it's chaos engineering or SRE practices or whatever,
right?
Having that be a part of the narrative when it comes to solution design and solution architecture is a pivotal part towards building systems that work.
Yeah.
And if it's not a part of it, if you're not thinking about that, you're going to constantly be fighting the demons that can come from, again, distributed systems, distributed teams, all the interconnections, all the contracts, events, everything else that might happen that could potentially break things.
Yep.
And there's been a number of really high profile cases where, well, just last week, AT&T's network was down. I haven't dug super deep into it, but it sounds like it was a DNS entry error.
Really? I missed that one.
Something that simple broke an awful lot of stuff. And so what could you have done to make things more resilient in that scenario? What happens if US East, was it US East 1, I forget, whatever Amazon's US East is, I forget. What happens if that whole thing goes away? Does your whole system just die? Do you have failover? Do you have multi-region? Maybe your app doesn't need that. Maybe it does, but you should be asking those kinds of questions, because when there's a major outage, there was that Akamai outage, I think it was last year or something, brought like 35 or 40% of the internet crawling to its knees because, you had this one particular problem. Well, can you account for all of that? No, but you should be thinking about ways of keeping your system up. If that's the way that you're, like you said, $5,000 or $6,000 per minute to your company, what does it cost you? Now you can start to say, well, here's the things that we can do to prevent losing that cost, losing revenue, and then losing kind of the brand equity that you might have inside of, in the market overall.
It is cheaper to spend the time building the redundancy than paying for the failure.
Yeah. And those failures can get real expensive real quick.
One of my projects that I had was because a retailer went down for 3 days during Black Friday, during Christmas time. and the amount they lost in revenue was, I think we estimated it closer to like 20,000 a minute that they were losing. And they were down for 3 days because they couldn't find the error in the system. It took them 3 days to figure out what happened.
And, that to me, you also have to understand what is your patterns? Like, okay, well, this is I spent a lot of time in healthcare, and we always talked about Q1, January 1st at midnight, all of these plans go live. And, I was in the pharmacy benefit space for a good number of years, and every freaking New Year's I spent it sitting there at midnight in a war room waiting for things to break. And, that wasn't super fun, but you should be thinking about what are your patterns look like and how do you make sure you know what spikes are going to be there and the impact when things go wrong. And, there was years that I was there where really nothing happened. And I spent 2 hours on New Year's Eve sitting in an office where nothing really happened. And I had to tell all my friends, like, see you later. I got to go to work.
You had to sit there. Yep. Mm-hmm. Or you're on pager duty for the same thing. And, it's
this was before remote work.
Yep.
I mean, you really didn't have ways of connecting in the way that you do now.
100%. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because based off the conversations I was having this week, I think it's something that's needed and required. Based off of that one post you saw on Reddit, it seems people are answering the same kind of question, saying, "Oh, it's just built into what we do. Like we just normally do this now." But I don't think I agree with that still, because I think there's a different level of resilience engineering in itself, or chaos methodologies or chaos engineering, that is above and beyond maybe that look at the non-functional requirements of being scalable, being reliable and such. Like there's different levels. And I think you can build out normal practices for a team to try to build resilient systems, but then you can take it to another level and say, okay, am I using all of the practices, the methodologies, the principles, whatever it is in whatever format to build the cloud architecture out correctly, and then my microservices architecture out correctly? Are my playbooks inside of the organization written well so people know what to do if certain things happen, so that I'm also being able to, maybe it's a manual process, but I can bring a system back up, or I can fix something when there's a problem so fast that a customer is not, even aware of it, because that's really the end state, is that outcome. The customer should not know that that a problem has happened in the system.
That's right.
Right. So
you can, this leans a little bit into like platform engineering, but you're talking about at that little bit of a higher level. If you're having kind of managed infrastructure through a platform, and say US East goes down, well, if they have the ability to redeploy you into, US Central, I forget the names of all of them now. Like they may be able to do that through infrastructure as code and have that thing back up in a minute, and nobody's going to know they're going to be like, wow, this thing didn't work for a second. Oh no, it's back. I don't know.
It must have been my computer or something. Yeah.
But I mean, when you talk about kind of like the black swan event, the thing that you can't really predict, but you have that forethought of thinking that this is a critical application. It's going to cost me lots and lots of money if it goes down. Now I have well thought out, you have your application level, you have your infrastructure level, and then you have kind of your organizational level and understanding those processes. And okay, great. Good resiliency engineering is going to think across all of those and give each of them the tools necessary to be able to succeed.
Yep, 100%. Do you mentioned Black Swan? Do you know Nassim's book?
Yeah.
Have you read that book?
I've read I think 2 or 3 of his books.
Okay. I like Anti-Fragility. I had actually asked myself that question, saying, does this really fit into that model, right? Is it really anti-fragile or not? And I think at the end of the day, it's not, because if you were creating the ability to have a system with anti-fragility built into it, you're saying that it's going to become stronger and better based off the tests. And that's not really what it's doing. Our system is not on its own getting better like our immune system. It's not getting better on its own. So I had liked the idea to use it as an analogy, and then I thought about it and I'm like, well, maybe not, right?
But it's not so far off that you can't use the analogy. I mean, kind of anti-fragility and that type of thinking there are ways you can build anti-fragility into resiliency.
Well, that would be my question, is because if anti-fragility says the system learns from its failures, from its disruptions, making it better equipped to handle future events, right? Well, then the question becomes, how do we build systems that work more like our immune system, right? So they can observe, log the issues, learn from the issues, which maybe is where AI comes in nowadays, and adjust itself. So maybe it's configuration adjustments, maybe it's hardware, physical hardware or software adjustments, and then makes itself better. I mean, that is the end state. If you're going to have a system that truly could monitor itself, repair, and then get better so it hadn't deal with it in the future, has to deal with it in the future, right? That would
in
be
a lot
cool
of ways,
design.
Kubernetes does some of that already. When it comes to auto scaling, relaunching pods that are failing, it does some of that. And again, understanding what applications need that and don't need that are also key, but there's definitely ways of building in self-healing into these. You just need to think about it thoroughly and what are the things that you want to prepare for? And then what are those black swan events that might come up that, to the example you gave where a retailer was down for 3 days, that should literally never happen.
Right.
You should be, if you're the head of engineering or a CTO, you should be thinking about those kinds of things and protecting the business and saying, this can never happen. Okay, great. How do we prepare for that in one way or another?
Right. And there are systems that do try to learn to this too, to your point, right? Like certain security devices and other things that are on our network are built to learn from certain types of attacks, right? If you're getting a denial of service attack over and over again, right? Your reverse proxy or something else. And there was another edge device that I can't remember the name of, but it was such a unique device that people were making a living of just knowing how to configure that system to have it work the way it was supposed to work for an organization to protect it. But it was literally a full-time job. They didn't do anything else. They literally just came in and they basically taught this system how to work for your company over several months. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
That's why I like our field. It's a good field.
It's super, super fascinating. To kind of shift topics a little bit, I found a really, really interesting kind of question / example from Reddit where the title of it was, the CTO of my company challenged all engineering managers with an interesting exercise that was, eye-opening for me. And the CTO of the company did a fun of, let me try that again. The CTO of the company did a fun of experiment where he basically asked all of the tech leads to give a simple coding task that a junior type developer would be able to accomplish, and give that to the kind of the engineering manager, and I would assume maybe even the engineering director, to see if they could actually do it. And it, seemed like they were trying to, ask the question of, well, how well do they actually know what their team's doing? Yep. How well do they understand what path, how well do they just understand it? And they got some really interesting results.
Yeah, I like that one. I think it was worth doing, and I think I would do it myself. I would not have a problem running that. because I think it helps them to understand their role and what they should be looking at that, nobody's explained. But it also allows you to see the validity or lack of for who you put in those roles, right? Because we move people into certain roles that maybe they shouldn't be in those roles, like putting non-technical people in technical roles. Right.
Well, I think this. So there's a lot of people on like in the comments of Reddit, and so take that for what it's worth. But talking about how having a manager that doesn't know how to to do debugging or breakpoints or other what they see as kind of insignificant tasks is a huge problem, and how they if they don't understand these basic things, then they don't understand the rest of what we do.
Correct,
and it
100%.
makes them very concerned about being able to actually describe what that team is doing to kind of the broader set of the company. But while I kind of agree with that, I think there's a lot of flaws with that line of thinking as well.
Maybe. So exactly to what you just said, if I expect my development team to be following engineering practices that create the highest quality output possible, so whether it's extreme programming, test-driven development inside of that, right? Whether we follow whatever practices, it could be pair programming, it could be whatever, right? But outcome-driven, how they do their metrics, how they follow Agile or Scrum or something else, like all of these components. I expect them to work a certain way to build the best outcome. If I don't know how to go and review what they do with them, or give them guidance, or recommend to go read something, or do something, or watch something, right, then I'm not effective at my job. Right? My job is not to listen to them just complain when they're not happy about their job and they're having a bad day. That's not the whole job. Though I think some people think that's the job. So to what you said, I think it is a valid test to say, can they go and do some of those basic things? Because a non-technical person in a technical role is going to be ineffective helping that team grow as a technical team.
Or to be able to convey what that problem is to the broader organization.
Right. When you go in the other direction and they look up instead of down, when the manager is trying to give the director an overview, and maybe the director is technical. So what happens then, right? Because then the director is going to get annoyed because the manager can't actually explain the problem correctly. And if they're smart, they're going to say, you know what, never mind. I'm going to go talk to the tech lead. I'm going to go just talk to the developers. And I'm going to get the information I need from somebody who actually knows how to speak the language, right? Knows what's going on.
Or it could be the other way around, where the manager is more technical, but the director is less technical. And then you get the telephone game problem of the manager tells the director something like, hey, we're having a problem with this, whatever. And then the director's needing to go to the CTO and tell the CTO, hey, we're running behind on this thing because of X, Y, and Z, but they don't really understand it.
Yep.
The manager understood it maybe 60%. The director understood it 30%. They're describing it to the CTO and they described it 15%. And all of a sudden now, the actual problem has become so watered down that nobody really understands what the problem is.
Right. It's dismissed. And the problem is it gets dismissed. And now when it breaks, now we go back to our other discussion. Now when it breaks in production and the whole thing is down, right? Everyone's screaming. Well, why didn't you explain it? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us the severity or the issues or, the whole line of discussions that happens?
I didn't know this was that important.
Right. Yep. But I think there's multiple parts to this, right? Because it's, and again, I think doing these kind of tests is a great idea for many reasons, but here's a question. What does it open up? What does it make visible for us? Is it the visibility that the teams don't communicate well, like we just said, and that they don't understand the role? Or is it a problem because we're putting non-technical people into technical roles because there's not enough technical people to put into the roles? Or is it just a misunderstanding of the roles?
I think it's a complete lack of understanding what the role is and what that role should be. Because if we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but you have your engineering managers, you have architects, you have like technical product managers if they're around, you've got some technical program managers if they're around, you've got all of these people. And what is the engineering manager's role or director's role in your organization? What are you actually expecting them to do? And are they, you have the concept of developer, you have the tech lead. Is the engineering manager a super tech lead? Maybe. Or are they someone who is supposed to help with the organizational politics, prioritization, keeping all the garbage away from the team? Like, what do you want them to actually be? And then you can start to answer some of these questions, because if you're wanting an engineering manager to be a super tech lead, that, you want me to go code? Sure. Let me go code. Well, that has its own set of problems, because if they're still in the code, then they're not managing, and they're not, okay, well, if you're not managing, helping prioritization, helping the organizational politics, all those kinds of things, at some point that is going to come home.
Right.
And now you're going to get blindsided by it. Then the team's going to be like, manager, you were supposed to protect me from this. Well, they were helping you code and, doing PR reviews and all kinds of other things. God knows what. Right. And now all of a sudden you have these gaps. And what are you trying, what's the role and what are you trying to, to optimize for?
That's a fair question, because in a small organization, the tech lead might be doing both of the things because they're taking care of their team, or it's the project manager that's doing part of it, or they're splitting it between the two, and it works for a small org. As the organization gets bigger, then you might have what used to be just a manager and a manager for the people, and the manager is focused on the people. And I think based on the fact that we just keep creating roles and titles and names, engineering manager just means a manager with a technical background, so he understands what the team is doing. That's how I'm going to define it as we talk here, right? Because in my mind, it makes sense. Again, it goes back to having non-technical people over technical teams is a bad formula. Like, you don't have to be an expert, but it helps. It helps if you know, like you said, what the team is actually doing. So in my mind, I see like an engineering manager as a people-focused role, but understands the technology so they can get in and help if they had to, right? They should be able to get in there and ask logical questions to go, well, if a team member is stuck, or how can I help? Or if they're looking at their career growth and they're going to help them from a coaching standpoint. If you've never followed that for your own career growth, how are you going to give them recommendations? Like, well, I was an accountant and they put me in this management role now. So, but I can help you. It'll be fine. Yeah. Okay. You've never been up at 3 a.m. on a production issue within a team trying to fix a software application, right? Yeah. No. So you have no idea what my life's like that kind of thing. And then I think
it's kind of a crazy example to talk about an accountant, but I actually have seen a lot of like technical product people, architects and software developers they grow from a different tree.
Yeah.
There's similarities a little bit, but they grow from a different tree. Don't forget that. And, other like business analysts that have a little bit of a technical acumen, I've seen move into engineering manager roles. And again, all that can be kind of scary, especially if you're on the team and all of a sudden you have this manager that doesn't really know what you're doing.
Yep. I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of my career working with people who were not truly what I would say is technical backgrounds. They might have worked in the IT department, but they could never have built any of this stuff ever. They never wrote a line of code unless they're playing in Excel. And I would spend more time whiteboarding and trying to explain and fighting with them about why we needed resources or teams or software. I worked for a company once where it took me a year to get the architecture approved. And it was because of politics and logistics and everything to get them to spend the money to get the software licenses for something they wanted fixed. And then they were upset because it wasn't fixed yet. Like, it was not understanding the the way that our environment works, the way the things we do work, right? It's very interesting to stand here and look backwards and go, oh yeah, now I see what caused that. Now I understand, why I think it's so important for some of these roles to really have some of that technical background.
I agree. And there's a lot of comments around here like, oh, the CTO had a big brain idea. Like, this is awesome. And it's like, I'm not going to totally disagree with that, but I would also start pointing the finger back at the CTO saying, well, you have your whole leadership group and yet you don't know what you want them to do.
Right.
And you don't know what that role actually is. And you've had people hired into there, which again, you're the one that's ultimately responsible for this. So, like you have this interesting little exercise that you can do, but in the end, it rolls back into your office. So
right now,
you need to be the one to start to answer some of these questions and set the ways of working across your organization. And then people can kind of get on board with that or not get on board with that.
Yeah, my question to it would be, is this CTO new to the organization? They're doing it to kind of get a current state, or is it something they just read an article, right, and then came in and tried it that morning?
And it doesn't say at all, but I think this is a pretty cool exercise. It definitely gets you thinking. It definitely gets you talking, and it because in the end, you just have to figure out how do you going to operate. Because if you as the CTO, the directors and engineering managers, product managers, this whole slew of people that's there, if you don't have a solid ways of working, the people that end up paying the price are the developers.
Yeah.
Because they get caught up in all of these different winds and changing direction and everything else. And they don't know how to kind of work inside of that ecosystem.
Yeah. I think the most important question off of it is probably, what do you want that role to do? Like you just said, like having a clear defined role. And if it's a people person role, which it normally is, then what does that mean? Because then if their job is, like you said, they're doing team protection, they're making sure we have the right people, they're following core management practices, so one-on-ones, feedback, delegation of tasks, like they're making sure that they're getting the right amount of time to do some learning and mentoring for themselves to grow. They're looking at utilization. They're looking at, rotations of different skills, different people on and off of teams to get opportunities to do new things and learn new things. Or it's all people stuff, right? I think that's good.
But on the other side of that, you have things like managing tech debt, understanding, what makes sense to, like, how do you actually have your technology interactions and everything else that go along with it? And are they a part of it? Are they not a part of it? Like, how do they play inside of that game? Is that solution architects that come up with those kinds of things? But how do you prioritize? Like, there's so much that goes into there.
And how much
could
do they
be
touch
one person, but like one person generally, if they're a technologist, is good at, everybody has a, kind of a percentage of how good are they at this versus that. And it's finding those people that are good at all of it tend to be more unicorns, and they're hard to find.
Yep. And I know what we do now is different than what we did 10, 20 years ago, obviously, where the roles were different and everything else. But a lot of the teams that I ran a long time ago, you did do both of this. There wasn't such thing as, giving away a lot of this work. So I did I stopped where I wasn't coding as much, but I was architecting our system. But then the architect was also the manager for the team. So you had to learn how to be a manager. So what happened is a lot of these things would fall off and you'd pick what you needed minimal of the sets. So you would protect the team, help them architect the system. They'd go build it while you went off to deal with the meetings and deal with the other headaches of the business. And then I did a minimum of like feedback and one-on-ones. And I was like, okay, if I can keep my team happy and focused and I can help them build something, and then I can keep everybody away from them, I can at least do the minimal of everything to keep everything moving forward. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in those scenarios where they're picking the top 5. And they're saying like, these are my top 5 things. If nothing else, I have to do to be good at this role, and everything else gets, dropped to the floor.
Absolutely. I think we all have to do that in one way or another. And I think it's just a kind of a thing, a game you have to play inside of your organization. It's what makes it tough to rise up those ranks. Not everybody, but there's a lot of people like, oh, I'd love to be CTO. If I was CTO, I'd do X, Y, or Z. Like, no, most of the time as a CTO, you're not dealing with building out this cool system or doing these cool things. You're spending most of your time dealing with stuff like this.
Yeah.
And
people
what are the
don't realize till they get there. Yeah. What's actually in some of the roles when you actually get to those roles. It's like most of us in senior roles would love to just go back to having a week of nobody bothering us, putting our headphones on and writing code.
Yeah. There's many a week where I would love that. Just let me go pound some keys for a while and just leave me alone.
I missed putting just loud music on, putting my headphones on and disappearing into a corner for 8-10 hours a day, just writing code for some, system I was designing and building. Like I would do that in a heartbeat again some days, because it was so productive feeling. Like you felt like even if nothing worked, you still worked through it enough to move a little bit forward. You felt good from it. You felt like you solved something by the end of the day. You built something. When you do meetings all day, sometimes it's impossible to get that same feeling. I think that's what drives people, kind of crazy at different roles, is because they want to have that same feeling of success. And it's a different skill set. It's a different way of working. So it's harder maybe to define. It goes back to your metrics thing. How do I measure this?
It's also why you see a lot of people leave management. Mm-hmm. They want to move into management because it's a promotion in air quotes. It's more money. Those kinds of things. And then they get there and they're like, this is dreadful. I hate it. I just want to go back to being a tech lead or being, a senior or whatever, and just go be, principal level dev and just leave me the hell alone.
Yep. When I was working back at IBM a lifetime ago, one of the things I really thought was distinguished engineer. You could stay that sole contributor and really work on your craft. And you could continue to become really good at your craft. You didn't have to go into management. And they were one of the earlier companies that had that 2-stream kind of format. A lot of organizations do that now, which I think is actually really important, because many of these roles fit a certain personality type or a certain group, where if you're good at managing and good with people, you're probably going to go into a leadership type role. If you're good at wanting to go build stuff and you're just really crazy smart, and you're gonna, like our friend David, who does the AI stuff and this data science stuff, like smart, like that guy's amazing. And I couldn't see him going and being a people manager. Like that would be such a loss to the world. And understanding those groups and having paths for people, I think, is important. I know it's off track from the CTO thing, but I think it's the same. It fits in, because if I was that CTO asking these different questions, I'd also look at that and see, are people in the right roles? Because after I ask that question, my next question would be, okay, do I have the right people in the right place? So I'm using their strengths. Am I doing the right things?
I totally agree. So here's another thing that some CTOs love to kind of throw out there and do. And I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But have you ever actually seen a hackathon work?
No. I don't think so.
Boy, they throw them out there like, oh man, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then, but I've seen very mixed results on it.
Yeah. I've seen them run well, but I don't know if I've seen something really come out of it on the other end that wasn't more of a, yeah, we thought of that already kind of conversation.
Yeah. I think under some circumstances, so I have seen a couple of these work, but they have to be under a very, very specific set of circumstances. And one of them is that everyone is bought in.
We have to have the backing, right? Yeah.
And it can't just be, oh, well, we're going to do it in this little organization or that little organization. No, it has to be everyone is on board with making this thing happen. And The second part is it has to be done around a problem that is actually a problem for the organization.
100%. Yep.
So like the best example of a hackathon project I can think of is Backstage.
Okay.
So Backstage was a hackathon project at Spotify in 2014. And it took 6 years for it to grow into something that was actually, kind of majorly, well, maybe not 6 years, 3 or 4 years until it was majorly useful across the organization. But they were very bought in. They were the focus of the hackathon was around things that could truly make the business better. And you had the ability to get the people that you needed to actually make a difference. So what I kind of mean by that is, to take 3 or 4 days or a week of work. Yes, you need developers, you need those kinds of things, but you need designers, you need product people, you need, a lot of other things around it to be able to pull that together into something that makes sense. And you have to be able to give people some kind of, mechanism of like, not just like, wow, great job. You got first place in the hackathon. You did it, great. Now we're going to go take and make $10 million off of this and screw you. Like that's no good either. Right. You have to find a way to incentivize them, reward them, and, pull it together in a way that starts to make sense.
Yeah, that part, the backside of that's almost an independent conversation in its own, because the ability to incentivize will create innovation in its own. People will be very innovative to make money. Yeah. To have other options, days off, anything. It could be many different things, but to do that. The thing I think of, not going too far away from where we were just talking, but the thing you remind me of is a friend of mine paid for his wedding through a company we worked for would pay us for writing articles for magazines. And the magazine paid us for writing the article for the magazine. So for each article, you could make almost $1,000 because you got paid by the company, and then you got paid by the magazine company, and you got paid whether it published or not. So if the magazine decided not to publish it, you still got paid for part of it. So him and I started writing a bunch of articles, and he ended up writing enough articles that it paid for part of his wedding. And I thought that was like one of the greatest stories of being incentivized to both help the company because it got the word of mouth out for the skill sets of the technologists we had in house, and then helped him in the process. Right. And then he's been there, his entire career is still there. He stayed because the company supported him, and then he supported the company. So it was like a nice story around over, all around. But it shows how, like you're saying, incentivizing can change somebody's mindset.
Well, I think this leads into, the root of a hackathon that does provide the most value is giving people the opportunity to solve problems that are there in front of them. And have recognition for it, right? Yeah. The biggest thing is, maybe they do a hackathon once a year, but you're probably better off giving people time to do those kinds of things way more often than that. Like, there's a lot of companies that say, all right, Friday afternoons are your time to go solve the technical challenges that you have, whether it's tech debt, refactoring, any of those kinds of things. For anybody that's ever looked into the shape up kind of agile methodology, it says that, you have these 6 week up to a maximum of 6 weeks of a project. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's two weekers or whatever. But once you finish a 6 week cycle, you have a 2 week cool down. Right. Where, like, I always laugh at people that do Scrum, and it's like you sprint every 2 weeks and sprint and sprint and sprint and sprint and sprint and sprint. It's like, well, no, you're a marathon runner at that point. Yeah. But in that cool down, period in shape up. One of the couple of things you're supposed to do: fix the bugs from the crap that you released before, but then also be able to go and reduce tech debt, to be able to, again, solve those kinds of problems and challenges and everything else that are affecting you immediately. And that has a humongous effect over a pretty short period of time across the entire organization. And that's what you're trying to do with a hackathon, in my opinion. But instead of it being this weird kind of, I don't know what the right word is for it. It just seems like this kind of dog and pony show.
Yeah.
Instead of it being that, it's like, no, you get every Friday afternoon, or you get these 2 weeks, you get this time to go make the company better and to make your life better. Go fix the thing that pisses you off.
Well, that's what it should be. That right there, what you just said, the last piece. And, I remember for one of my companies, I went and built our vacation day database to manage for vacation time, because company didn't have anything, and I was managing a ton of people, and just in managing their time off, right? The amount of time it took me to manage their time off was ridiculous. And I'm like, all right, forget it. I always took the week off between Christmas and New Year's. And I literally sat and built the application in 5 days before I went back to the office. Then it became, the entire company started using it. And then they were upset if I didn't support it, because now all of a sudden it was a production app.
You've built a mission critical tool.
Yeah. I'm like, what did I do to myself? Right. But, the idea of being able to go and fix a problem that you see in the organization, because at that lowest level, and I hate to say lowest level, but at that hands on the ground, deep in the woods, weeds, whatever, can really see what's happening level, it's actually the most important level. Your developers, your technologists, your day-to-day people in the organization see all the problems. There's nothing hidden. They know all the issues, all the problems, all the workarounds. Giving them the ability to take, like you said, a day or a week or something else and go be creative. Go be innovative. Figure out a way to work around these things that are causing inefficiencies in the organization, and then reward them for that.
Well, and you can, to kind of close this thing up and circle it back to the resiliency engineering, if you give people time to remove all the things that we just talked about, you are going to be more resilient as an organization.
Yes.
You're going to have more time to build more resilient applications, to build resilient infrastructure, to build resilient everything. And that, to me, is one of the keys. There's a big difference between reacting to a problem that's happened versus planning for possibilities of things that might happen. And, to make a quick sports analogy, I think golf is one of the hardest sports to play in the world. And one of the reasonings why is you're not reacting. It is something sitting right in front of you. It's right in your face. You have all of the time in the world just to swing and hit it down the middle of the fairway. And that is one of the most intimidating things in the world. When most other sports, it's, somebody passed me the ball, or they threw me the ball, or this thing's coming at me and I'm racing a car that's driving and I got to react to the other drivers around you. No, it's not a reactionary thing. You're now having to do all the planning up front, and then you have to go execute when there's a problem. And being able to iron all that out and to plan it all out is how you get good levels of resiliency.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Mine wasn't as exciting. I was just going to say the quote that I always use, really, which is, it all starts with people. So at the end of the day, building resiliency is the culture and the people in the organization. And then all those good practices and everything else, like you said, it all works from there.
Yeah, I totally agree, man.
But instead, let's just go play golf.
There you go. Let's do that.
We're gonna go practice. We need to learn.
Well, I guess we can call it here. We're gonna go play golf, everybody. Enjoy.
That sounds good. Let's go play golf.